So, hi. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about daily checklist, daily grind, I guess is another way of putting it. Having all of our ability in our hands to cross stuff off our list and get stuff done. Can we address the elephant in the room? And I'm
Waiting for
hoping
it.
that
You
it's
bet.
not me,
Yeah.
but let's talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is this. When we were setting up and project planning this particular podcast, the Jeff Heilman Project, I asked you, can we sing your praises? Can we talk about all of the startups that you've done and the books that you've been mentioned in and the articles that have been written about you? Can we make sure to throw down some clout about how awesome and incredible we all know that the Jeff Heilman experience is, the Jeffersons, if you will? And you told me straight out, no. You said, I don't want to do that. I'm going to talk about how many jobs I've lost. I'm going to talk about how many kids I've had. I'm going to talk about me, the wreck, because why? Why are you choosing to go that route as opposed to all the other traditional podcasts that we've all listened to where we all know that how much so-and-so makes and how much so-and-so is done? And like, why is this podcast different? Why are you coming at it like a nobody when people say they want to hear from a somebody?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Originally this was going to be called Hits and Misses with Jeff Heilman.
Yeah.
And that's, everybody wants to hear. So I'll tell you a story about that. I'm playing golf in 2017. We had just made a really big couple $100,000 commission check at IBM on some deals that had closed in late 2016. And you insisted that I upgrade my car. And then you paid for a weekend for me to go play golf at Pebble Beach, which was a dream for me to go play Pebble Beach. And if anybody listening out there likes golf at all, even if you don't play golf at Pebble Beach, even if you just go play the Peter Hay par 3, the experience of taking your golf clubs out at near the starting box and walking over to the Peter Hay golf course and playing 9 holes on the short par 3 or hitting golf balls, it is such an otherworldly experience to be able to go. And this was something you really wanted me to have.
Absolutely.
And you wanted me to do it in a new car.
Yep.
And debt free. And so we wrote a check for a new Cadillac and you booked me an insanely expensive room. I've never paid half the cost of that room for a single night for a hotel out of my own pocket. Yep. It was more than double the highest price I'd ever paid per room. And I spent 3 days at Pebble Beach. And I got to play golf with a very, very successful venture capitalist who, I don't know if I should name him or not, but he's very successful and had tens of millions of shares of Airbnb and Snapchat and a bunch of other very big companies. And I'm going through, and if everybody knows Pebble Beach, there's a hole number 8, which Jack Nicklaus said was his favorite golf hole. If he had to play one golf hole the rest of his life, it would be number 8 at Pebble Beach. And there's a first shot, which is like a 4-iron into a blind tee shot over a ramping fairway that sets up like a 7-iron approach into a green where you're actually hitting over the Pacific Ocean to get to this green. It's fantastic. And I was on that hole with our venture capitalist, and I asked him, I'm like, what's it like? Like you've had hundreds of exits for hundreds of millions and billions of dollars per exit. What's it like to be able to do that? And he says, the crazy thing about it, Jeff, is that everybody always asks me about the wins, but they never ask about the losses. Mm. He said, yeah, I've had 100 exits and yeah, we've made billions of dollars, but I also funded with checks that I wrote on the front or that my partners have written on the front for $10 million plus 1,100 times for companies that no longer exist. Mm. And I'm just baffled by this note. And it really got me thinking, why don't we want to know about the failures? Why don't we want to know about what it really takes? Why don't we take the gloves off in a for this soft, wimpy approach to being wealthy to where we only want to look at the wins. And so it's hits and misses. And while the name of the show is the Jeff Heilman Project, which is
and really we have dedicated to each project, we have dedicated an episode on the hits and misses of that. So we're going to go through a period of weeks. And then at the end, concluding that week series, if you will, we're going to talk about the hits and misses. And so that's built in.
It's built into what we're doing. So
I think it's such a perfect
I'm not
segue.
going to pull punches on myself. Another thing we learned too is lead by sharing with other people. Use yourself as the bad example.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, some people could say, well, you should be a good example. You should be a leader, da, 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 da. But I've always found that if you share your vulnerabilities, if you share how you screwed something up in a story form with somebody directly related to where they may be screwing up right now, it's a way of letting them off the hook by but still making it clear what the adjustment needs to be. So that's why I don't want to talk. I mean, if you want to talk about successes, great, but it better not be self-serving. That was the message. If it's self-serving to talk about any success that I've had, then I'm not interested in that because this isn't a self-serving podcast.
And if we've learned anything from movies like Rocky, there's only about in the original Rocky, I think Andrew was talking about it. There's only like 10 minutes of the actual fight at the end. And you've got the entire movie is about how he keeps getting kicked in the teeth and how he's this nobody and so
doesn't believe in himself.
And the whole reason why we get so excited at the actual match we've been building up to the match is because of all the steps along the way.
Exactly right.
And so I think that this is the perfect segue for us to talk about your daily checklist, because what we're going to be doing over the next 9 weeks is we're going to drill down into each what we call the daily disciplines. You've got 9 daily disciplines that you get to check off on your checklist. And so what might seem like mundaneness of this going over this checklist is your daily routine, because we're excited to help people get to the wins. But the reality is it's a daily process to get there to where you finally get to celebrate the wins. And in Julie Morgenstern's book, which we read, Never Check Email in the Morning, originally we read Organizing from the Inside Out, awesome book. But Never Check Email in the Morning, she goes over morning routines, what she has found that have aided others in being successful, daily habits. And like what we're talking about, there's a daily routine that everybody has to subscribe to in order to get to the win. Because if you reverse engineer from the win backwards, you had to start out somewhere. And so what I'm mostly interested in is the fact that you just yesterday were like, you know what? Look at me. I'm not checking my email. I just woke up and I'm not checking my email. And it's like
yesterday I did. Today I did not.
It's such a victory to not immediately go into that, Pavlov's dog, like that gut check, like got to check my email. But to be able to instead look at your checklist. And what we're talking about is this. Could you maybe describe? I know there's a lot of audio listeners here, and I know we have video. Hey guys, if you want to watch us on YouTube, tune in on Tuesdays where there'll be new episodes each Tuesday for you to be able to watch the same podcast in video format. But for our audio listeners, we're looking at a tattered graph paper,
which is only a week old.
Which I don't even know where did you even find a pad of graph paper anymore? Do they have it at Walgreens or CVS?
CVS, yeah, that was pretty easy to do.
And how many boxes are on that graph paper?
It's 2 boxes a day going wide times 7 days is 14. It's 14 by 20. So what's 14 times 20? 500 and something.
Someone with math skills has just figured it out already.
Actually, sorry, it's 4. It's 8. 2, 3. I think it's 4 boxes a day times 7. So it's 28 times 20. So it's 560. 560 boxes on the left side.
Okay. Now, is this one sheet of graph paper for a month, for a week?
This is a week.
Okay.
Yep. This is 1 week. And I'll post a scrubbed version of this on the YouTube, in the YouTube notes. So you guys can download it if you want. This is just my daily.
You can just easily make a Google Doc link and then put it on the bottom
and post a PDF of it in the chat section, because most people that would look at this cold would be like, I'm never doing that. And I totally understand. You don't have to do all of this. But if you there's a great article, which I'm also going to make sure that we post in the YouTube notes, by Ken Krouge, who is the co-founder of InsideSales.com. He was also the sales leader for Stephen Covey's training system. that came out of the 7 Habits. And he writes about how his life was transformed by doing the same things every single day and by holding himself accountable to a checklist, a daily checklist. And all throughout history, we see Benjamin Franklin had a 13 daily discipline checklist that he used with a focus each week on one of those daily disciplines. And those 13 are very well known, right? Order is one of them, which is let every part of your business have its place. Let everything have its place. Let every part of your business have its time. Frugality, make no expense but to benefit yourself or others. There's another one on industry, be always engaged in something useful. So each day, Ben Franklin would go through this list of 13 disciplines with a strict focus. 1 week out of 13, he would focus on each of the disciplines themselves. And he made it 13 into 52 weeks, gives you 4 cycles. So he could go through this checklist 4 complete times each year of focusing on this. And so about 2006, I wrote my Bulletproof Blueprint for Lifelong Success, which was my 20, which I took Rockefellers, I took the Vanderbilts, I took Franklin, I took John Maxwell had one. Frank Betcher that wrote probably one of the best books on selling ever. That's How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success Through Selling, who was also best friends and did a whistle stop tour around America with Dale Carnegie, who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. These guys are really disciplined around the area of doing the same routine. And so I needed something that would allow me to handle all of my email, all of my customer requests, all of my pipeline, all of my inbound calls and text messages, the things that my manager or my team would need me to do, all of my meeting notes. How do you keep track of all this stuff when you're scaling a multi-million-dollar business and do it to the point where you can still take a half a Saturday off a week and rest and not be worried about the sky being falling down? And for me, I found that this page, which is originally the one pager, was inspired by the Mastering the Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish, who talks about the one-page strategic plan, who got that from the Ron Chernow
Well, I like
biography from Rockefeller.
even if you take it into the context of growing up, my grandfather had an RV, and hanging by the door in the RV was a laminated piece of paper with all the checkbox, like, do you have the spare tire? Do you have the fire extinguisher kit? And we were not permitted to go on our road trip until everything was checked off, because in order to have a successful trip, you had to make sure that you had everything with you. And I know airplane pilots, the same, before they go on a trip, they have their manifest
checklist,
and they check. And then they have to, don't they have to do it back and forth with each other? They have a co-pilot, check.
So let's talk about
check.
Yep. So what they found, and this is in Checklist Manifesto, which is a book commissioned by the World Health Organization to figure out effectively if 100,000 people in the United States are dying in surgery because somebody forgets to take the sponge out before they sew them back up. Why? Why is that? And what the guy that was commissioned to go do it, and his name, I wouldn't even attempt it because I don't have it in front of me. I haven't practiced it, but what he found in his research was that after a certain point of complexity in doing a project or a series of tasks, the mind cannot remember the proper order, etc. And there's 2 examples of that. They're very good in the book. First one is in World War I, the planes were simple, single engine. The pilots knew how to do in their head. They knew engines. They were engineers. They knew how to make the things work. And very, very little engine failure in World War I. However, by World War II, they had twin engine and even 4 engine planes. And because of the level of complexity to check, is there any air or water in the fuel? Is the electrical right? Are the ailerons right? All these checks that need to be done became so complex once they went from 1 engine to 2 engine that literally perfectly good airplanes were falling out of the sky because checklists were not being adhered to. And so they started mandating checklists for all flyers. Every single time for every aspect of flight, pre-flight takeoff, setting there. I don't know the name of it, but when you're taking off, there's a go, no go decision point at the end of the runway that needs to be decided upon before you let off the brakes at the end of the runway, so that hey, either I'm going to push through this and take off even with trouble and get into the air and then circle back and land if I need to, or I'm going to power it back, but I have enough runway to stop. all of those things need to be decided in advance. That's one example with the increase of the number of engines. The second example was the example of the little kid up in Canada who had fallen through the ice. She was 6 or 7 years old and falls through the ice. She's down there for 25 minutes. Dad goes in after her. Dad gets hypothermia. Mom goes in after him. Mom gets hypothermia. And the neighbor's sitting there with a rope pulling all three of them out. 47 minutes later, CPR from the paramedics is being conducted on the young child. She got an internal core body temperature of 62 degrees, almost frozen solid.
Yeah.
And yet, 2 years later, perfectly good, happy 8-year-old child who was basically dead and frozen solid. And then 2 years later, she's happy, enjoying third grade or whatever she was at.
They attributed that to the checklist that they had.
And the guy who was doing the book went in and interviewed the chief medical officer for the hospital and said, "How in the world did you do it?" And he's like, "Oh, brother, we live in Canada. Kids fall through the ice all the time. We know what we need to do in order to save kids that fall through the ice." That's the good news. The bad news is it's 493 tasks need to be done in a specific order within a specific time frame. And if any one of those series of tasks are not done in the right order in the right time frame, the kids' chances start to go way down. And I got sick and tired of losing these kids when we know what we need to do to revive them when they fall through the ice, because it happens every week.
Yeah.
That I made sure that a checklist for what to do anytime somebody falls through the ice is posted in every single room in the hospital. And all of a sudden we stopped losing kids falling through the ice. And all of a sudden my light bulbs go off and I'm saying, I'm flying a multi-engine airplane here with the business that I'm running. We all are. It's a multi-engine airplane. It's too complex to try to keep track of everything that we're doing in our head. Now, the other thing that I found at work that I need to make sure that I'm very clear about is that once we get, for these large companies, once we have systems in place at work that allow us to do accounting, that allow us to keep track of hundreds or thousands of SKUs with tens of thousands or millions of individual units in inventory, once these systems are in place, you can actually scale your business up beyond imagination. But without those systems in place, the businesses and the jobs that we run on a daily basis become almost impossible to do, even the simplest of things, especially when we get tired.
So for those people that are listening, for those people that are watching right now, that you like to call us entrepreneurs, we can tend to be highly creative. We can tend to be,
that's right,
as Florence Littauer puts it, sanguine and we're all over the place. We have your 4 personalities. You've got your phlegmatic, your melancholy, your sanguine, your what was the other one? There's one more.
Phlegmatic, melancholy, sanguine, and choleric.
But the majority of those of the people that would be listening perhaps and hoping to get a nugget of advice is to go from being all over the place to coming in and honing into a daily kind of a checklist. If you are this creative person and you maybe are an entrepreneur or you are somebody who is a self-driven person, what's like a baseline checklist? Like, I know that I have to do all of these things. I know that I have to pick up my kids from school. I know that I have to do, laundry, blah, 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 blah. What would be a good starter point for the person just getting into saying, I know my life is crazy. How do they rein it in to an ingestible guideline for their week?
I would say to get started, real simple. Values, go through the process and write down, and I wouldn't show it to anybody because we can only align goals that really matter to us when we're clear on what our values are. And those values, a lot of times, and I've gone through this before, like when I look at family on my list of values, when I think about family, what does that mean? Well, it means Jeff getting to spend quality time with his family. That's number 6 on my list.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that my family comes 6th to everything else? Well, certainly not. I mean, if somebody falls through the ice, we don't live where it gets cold, but If somebody gets trouble or hurt,
Yeah.
that's top of
If
the
one of
list
the
is
kids
health.
needs us,
Yeah,
you get
we're right there.
priority.
But dad getting to spend time with his family is a reward for the hard work of doing what it takes to take care of his family. And so, for me, my values for family are down the list a little bit because I've got a
Yeah,
lot of
let's go through.
responsibilities for them.
So you're
Point being to
encouraging them
that,
to
hold
do
on,
values.
let me
Right.
answer the question you asked
Okay.
before. So what I would say is get clear about the values that matter to you as an individual, and don't show it to anybody, because you might value health over finances. You might value spending time with your family over doing your taxes or keeping your car clean. Or some people might value keeping their car clean and their house clean before they pay bills. It doesn't matter what your values are. What matters is that it matters to you, the individual, and that you know what those are, so that then you can go from values to roles, which is what are my responsibilities based on what I value, right? What are my responsibilities as a dad because of my value of family? Get clear on those. And then third would be goals. And I would write down, what are your goals for the year? What are your goals for the week? And then what are your goals for the day? If you just did that, you would be in the top 5 to 10% of productivity seekers
Ooh,
in the world. Just those
that's
three
good.
simple things.
That's good.
All right. So
That's
your next
good.
question
Oh,
was,
well, what we were talking about and what we were going to do for this episode is, since we're going to dedicate the next 9 weeks into basically your daily disciplines, which are rooted in your values,
yes.
what are the first 4 that you can share with us for this episode? And you don't have to have them in order if you don't want to reveal to your listeners what that order is. If you want to go ahead and do them in order, please feel
Yeah,
free to
what I
do
would
them in
say is
order.
that, really my personal values are not anybody else's business per
Yeah.
se, but this is a public audience. We're going public with this thing, and making it available to people. And so I have no problem sharing what my personal values are. Just recognize they'll probably be different from yours, and that's okay with me, and that should be okay with anybody else that's listening. So the first thing for me, and this is just my personal values, is my life does not work at all without a faith component. And whatever that means to you is great. What it means to me is I need time in prayer and meditation. I need Bible study time. I need time in church. I need time with my Christian brothers and sisters. And I need meditation time away, usually a weekend, 2 or 3 day weekend away once a quarter, where I just go and I spend 3 days unplugged, 3x5 cards, books with scriptures, books with positive, and it's a spiritual churning out and a cleaning and a cleansing out of just the heat that I'm under, which is pretty
And
constant.
I would encourage any wife or spouse to highly endorse allowing, even if it's the other way, it could be the other roles. It could be a full-time mom that works full-time, or a full-time dad that works full-time and the other takes care of the kids. Those people that are under that immense pressure need what we call a walkabout, like in
Yeah,
the
walkabout.
Australian outback. They're
Yeah.
going on their walkabout. You need to be able to be
And
free to
keep
sit
in mind
down
too,
and go
there's
away
a
and
cost
to
associated with it, because I
think.
got to take time away from work. There's a family cost because I'm away from the family. And I wasn't always staying at the Westin Hotel eating steak and lobster. I mean,
Or Pebble Beach.
or Pebble Beach. I mean, that I probably
that
did.
was a big reward.
I did weekends away for 10 years before I had a weekend like that, where I
Yeah.
could stay in a really nice hotel and have nice food and stuff. And even to this day, if I'm going someplace where you're not staying with me, I have no problem with Motel 6 or Super
But
8.
even when we had no money, when we were first married 27 years ago, we always made it a priority to go on a date night. I remember
That's right.
joking that our babysitters were going to get new cars before we were, because of the very fact that we were paying our babysitters more than the dates would cost that we would go to. But it's
Yeah,
so
we go to a movie
important.
for $25 and the babysitter was 100.
Yeah, it's so important to
Yeah.
it's me time, it's self-love, it's tuning into God, it's whatever you want to call it. It's shutting out the world and being able to be more in tune with the earth itself. And so that's your first one is
Yeah, so the first one
faith.
is spiritual recovery time. And if you look at 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he's going to talk about sharpen the saw as one of the 7. So the 7 in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People: be proactive, think win-win, begin with the end in mind, synergize, sharpen the saw, and there's 2 more. I'm sure they'll come to me. but one of them is sharpen the saw, and sharpen the saw is mentally, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. Emotionally for me is recovery time with the family. Spiritually is what I just outlined. Faith period, and you can read Glenn Bland's book on the success method of Glenn Bland, where he talks about the faith period. Physically is going to the gym, going for walks, and heavy lifting. As I got into my 40s, lifting heavy, deadlifts, squats, press, bench. I have to do that. If I don't do that, I'm not myself. And then from the mental side is just reading things that are interesting for me. Really gets me going. The education side. Sometimes watching a documentary, sometimes just vegging, letting my brain rest. But that faith component is really important, and allowing our faith to build by renewing. It talks about in Romans, talks about renewing your mind. It's renewing your mind to the faith that we have in the Word. Number 2 is health. If I don't have faith, my whole world shuts down. If I don't have health, I can't do anything with the faith that I've built. So lifting, going to the gym 3 days, 4 days a week. I'm trying to cut some of the sugars, and today was not a great day for that. But really, high protein, lean diet, lots of green veggies. What you put, Hippocrates, from which we get the Hippocratic oath for doctors to first and foremost do no harm, who lived 300 years before Christ, I think, or 250. Said, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food.
Pretty simple.
Pretty simple. And he also said, all disease, he said this 300 years before Christ, all disease starts in the gut. I thought that was fascinating. So one of my checklist items related to health says, health systems check: bowels, gut, teeth, best food. And I'll just run a system check, and I'll look for anything other than a green light in my mind to see how my health is doing. I'll make sure my teeth are taken care of, because the gum focal joints for teeth is the number one entry for bacteria into the body is through the teeth, which is why brushing and flossing. It's not just for teeth health to keep from losing them. It's to protect the entry point, your gums, from the number one place where bacteria enters your body, which is through that gum focal joint at the base of your teeth. So these are all health-related issues. And if we're doing the blocking and tackling for faith, and we're doing the blocking and tackling for health, then what's the next one? What comes after health and faith? Well, and this was a late entry for me, probably within the last year. Number 3 is order. Order. And we tell the joke from The Mandalorian where Bill Burr is doing his run, and he makes it past the blockades, and the kind of angry guy that's working for the Empire says, "Oh yeah, Bill Burr, or whatever the guy's name was in the show." He goes, he says, "What the people say they want is freedom, but what they really want is order." And I think it's so evil, because it's as if to say, and we, the evil empire, are going to give them that order. If so, God, so help us God. If it kills them, we're going to give them order and structure, and they're going to obey. And it's such a creepy thing. But I remember that phrase, and I remember how much I need order and structure, because if my inbox is out of control, or my meeting notes aren't cleaned up, or I don't know where my projects are, it just, I can't think. I don't know what to do. I don't know what the top priorities are until I go and clean up all those systems. But as soon as those systems are good.
And I know when you're stressed, and like,
it's always the same cause, is a lack of order.
I would say most couples that are married, when their spouse is stressed, it's more like, why are you're so mean to me, or whatever. Now I just need to go. Now I just know to go, hey,
Just
babe,
clean your
how's your
inbox.
systems right now?
Yeah,
How are your, I'm getting the feeling that you haven't checked your inboxes in a while. I'm getting a feeling that you haven't checked your inboxes in a while.
How's your email?
How's your
Yeah,
email?
exactly.
How are your inboxes? Because it is true that when you let things slip, and you're human, you're not going to mark everything off on your list every day. There's going to be moments when you get busy or things happen.
No, but it better not go
As
2
it
days.
piles up,
Yeah.
it ends up becoming something that ends up, I think Jack Canfield talks about in his book of successful people, he says it takes rent up in your brain. It's basically taking valuable real
Yeah.
estate,
You have
and
open loops that aren't reconciled.
whether you're
Drives you
paying
nuts.
attention to it or not, it's taking up space in your head and in your subconscious mind, and it's better to address them and to face it than to just let it linger and have these unfinished tasks, like a whole bunch of unfinished tabs on your computer just open all the time. It's the best way that
that's
he
right.
puts it.
Yeah, you're clearing your cache.
Yeah, clearing your cache. So
right.
let's keep clearing the cache away.
That's
We
right.
have, I think you're on number 3 was
That's
order.
3. Yeah, 3 is order. And again, order for me is, do I know where I'm at with regard to my checklist? And this is it. It's everything that I need to do is on here. How I'm doing, all my projects.
And didn't you say it takes you about 3 hours to make one of those?
To make one of these sheets, because there's 500 boxes, 500 or 600 boxes.
But even that in itself is a type of meditation, I would imagine.
Completely. Yeah.
That you go to a whole different place
because
when
I
you're
know
putting that together.
I know what my life operates like when I don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a train wreck. I can't keep track of all this stuff in my head because I'm trying to run a 6-engine airplane and be the pilot and the co-pilot and the engineer and the first officer and the engine mechanic.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do all of that stuff without my pre-flight checklist. So this is what I call my compass, because I use this all day, every day throughout the day to know, like, where am I at for some of the stuff on here. Have I checked all my customer sat issues? At work we call them SRs, or service requests. Have I checked where my service requests are? Have I looked at the joint execution plan for all the deals that I'm working on? And do I know what all the next steps are for each of the buckets across each of 7 or 8 train tracks, the line of business, the line of business and everything they need, the IT team and everything they need, the solution integrator and everything they need? Each of those have projects and tasks within each of themselves, times 7 train tracks, times each of the deals that I'm working, and they all need to be updated every single day in order to make sure that we're not having any gaps or anything that slips that doesn't get progress made on it. I can't keep track of that stuff in my head.
And what is number 4?
Number 4 is work. So work is the engine for short-term wealth building. So we have number 4 is work for short-term, and number 5 is work for long-term, which is long-term wealth building, and legacy, legal and tax. So those two really partner together, but work is number 4. And some people say, well, how could your family be less important to you than work? It's not that they're less important. It's that my value is that I need to be able to take care of my work so I can take care of my family before I personally get to spend time with my family, which is why we have family time every night at dinner, which is when we get together on weekends and stuff. But I really need to get, my work starts around 3:30 in the morning and I go hard until 6 at night, and then have dinner and then go back and clean up.
So in a perfect day, I'm looking at you said you have like 500 boxes for the week. In a perfect day, how long does it take for you to check everything off of your list? Are we talking like this is like a 16-hour to 16-hour commitment? Is this a 20? I mean, you're sleeping for some part of the day.
So what I have, the way that I have it set up, the reason I have 4 boxes a day is because I have 4 time slots, 4 deadlines each day to ship everything that's in the warehouse. Mm-hmm. Either ship it or get it out of the warehouse and put it back on the shelf. But I don't want anything on the shop floor come these times. And the time frames are 7:30 in the morning, 11 a.m., 2:30 p.m., 6:30 p.m., and then I do a cleanup by 10:30 p.m. So there's 3.5 hours in between each of those time slots, starting at 7:30 in the morning. I usually start work around 3:30, 4 o'clock. But 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm driving toward that 7:30 ship deadline. And then between 7:30 and 11, I'm driving everything toward that 11 a.m. ship deadline. And I do that 4 times a day. So I'm shipping completed work, always of the top most important tasks that are bubbling up to the top of the list. Some stuff I don't have to do till 6:30 at night. So I'll push it out to that bucket and I don't see it again for 6 hours. And it allows me to chunk the work. And if there's one thing that I could tell people after you set your values, your roles, and your goals, that would help people be productive. I learned this from Giadi Bonsall, founder of App Dynamics, is to have 1 mile marker at a time. He talked about this. He said when he was building App Dynamics, he had 1 mile marker, one kind of major goal that you're driving for. And so right now, the 1 mile marker that I've got is a single deal that I'm working on, and I need to close it by the end of the fiscal year. And I've had 2 monster deals close in the last 12 months, each with that same laser focus. So one of my checklist items each day, and I do it 4 times a day, is, do you know what your major mile marker is? So I'm reminded with a checkbox 4 times every single day what that main mile marker is, which is the name of the account that I'm working on for this major deal. If you could literally put that mile marker and say, if it's a month, 2 months, 3 months out, whatever it is, this is the thing I'm driving toward. It's a trip to Disneyland, or it's paying off my car, or paying off my Visa card, job promotion, or whatever it is.
Business start date.
Everything, that's a stake in the ground that says, on the road from San Francisco to LA to go to Disneyland, we need to get to the I-5. Once we get to the I-5, before the turn off to Los Baños, we get to the I-5, that's the next mile marker. Then you get to the I-5, okay, we got to get to the Grapevine. We got to get gas before we get over the Grapevine, right? Each of those mile markers might take hours or days or months to get to, but they really anchor your attention with all the stuff that's coming at you.
So let's get personal for a moment. We have a few minutes left in this podcast, and I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm so happy that we're able to document this.
I'm so grateful that you are working as hard, and Andrew working in the audio studio here behind the scenes.
Personal application, and I'm sure that we have plenty of listeners that are single. The personal application that I know for a fact that you applied a checklist to 27 years ago was, you had read in your faith time, you had read write the vision, make it plain, that he who reads it can run to a clear goal. And in that really resonated with you, it really stuck with you. You were able to say, you know what, I agree with this statement. I don't think that we can run towards anything that we cannot see, having pre-worked out, have a list for it, have our values, all these things that you're talking about 27 years later. And I would just want to hear, what's your first, I guess that would be probably your first personal experience with a checklist, and how did that pan out? You had one goal, and that goal
the first mile marker was to meet you.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. That was a little bit different in that, a checklist is something that I have to do.
Yeah.
Right. It's a reminder of, okay, we got to do each of these things. But the checklist that I had before I met you was, it came to me in a vision. It wasn't something that I felt like I made up. Yeah. And it wasn't like, okay, I should probably write down my goal for what a wife would be. I was reading, I was spending time in prayer and meditation every day, and just trying to get my mind right. This is when I'm trying to be successful. I'm trying to set up the right routines. I'm like 20 years old or 21 years old. And I start reading. I was just trying to put good stuff in my head. It's like the first year where I realized that, oh, your mind is a field, and that field will produce if you put the right seeds in it. And then that field will produce again and again, and it'll actually get better at producing higher yields over time if you just keep putting the right stuff in and don't worry about the weeds. The weeds will take care of themselves, because when it comes to mental stuff, when you put good stuff in your head, it'll choke out the weeds, and there won't be any room for doubt after a while. Well, I just started that, and I had probably been reading the Bible for about 6 months. And I get to Habakkuk 2:2. And it talks about, write the vision down, make it plain in tablets of stone, so that he who reads it can run to that goal and not be hindered. It's like, okay, the Bible's telling me to write down goals. Yes, the Bible is telling me.
Yes.
Write down your goals. It's biblical. But right when I read that, I got this download in my mind. I didn't even know what a download was back then. I don't think the internet was around. But I got this download picture in my mind, like in the Matrix, when they say, okay, I need to learn how to fly a helicopter. Okay, you can fly a helicopter. It was that fast. And so I just took out a piece of paper, and I started writing as fast as I could this download. And it was an image, but it was an image in the form of a checklist of everything that, when I met you, 36 out of 36 things on the list. It was confirmation
Mm.
when I met you that this was the vision that I had 3 weeks. It was
And
3
that's the
weeks. It was 3 weeks before I met her. It was crazy.
and
So that's why I
that's what
didn't have
we
any fear about getting married, because it's like, what's better than 36 out
yeah,
of
right.
36? You're
How are
not,
we going to get better than that?
yeah,
And
that's,
I think that, and it's not,
and to this day, I've never met another person that has 36 out of 36, male or female, on the list. You are
well,
the it girl for me.
I would hope that our listeners would understand that you can't even get close to 36 out of 36 things on
Pretty
an
demanding.
item list if those things are not just physical attributes. There were things on that list where, like, the type of family that I came
think
from,
physical is
and
only like 20 things.
oh,
Just
haha.
kidding.
But the point being that, there are a lot of people out here that can apply having a clear vision, because that's really it seems like that's really what we're talking
Clear
about.
vision,
That is what this
definite purpose,
that
and
is what
definite plans.
these are just skills. Like, these are just tactile things. These are the wax on, wax off of life, that you have a checklist and that you can check those things off. But if you're going to go out to if you've got a list of the vision of the person that you're supposed to be with, and they're doing something good for the environment, you're probably not going to go meet them in an area where they're, not treating the environment kindly. So, because you begin to really curtail your appetite. You're curbing your appetite to only wanting to eat the type of food, only wanting to take in the type of propaganda, only wanting to have in front of you those things that are coming in line with your clear vision that you have.
Yeah, and I can't really explain the checklist with meeting you. I mean, that I wasn't very strong in my faith. My brain wasn't finished growing yet. I'm 21 years old. I'd met and dated a little bit, but not a lot. And this wasn't like my list to God or my petition or anything like that.
Yeah.
This was a download that said, "This is what you're looking for." It was almost like, it's like Obi-Wan Kenobi saying to Luke, "You will go to the Dagobah system. There you will meet Jessica. She will be your wife and be the mother of your children." Dagobah? What?
What you didn't know is that you were walking
Ben.
into the cave. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding.
I hit my head on the roof. I didn't want to eat snake soup. But it was a vision. It was a vision, and I can't really explain it other than that. It was a vision. I
But
wrote it
how
down.
many people can't really explain the vision that they have, that they're going to be successful? There's so many people that just have inside of them. They're like,
And
I
you
don't
gotta just
know.
keep working the vision
They're like,
over
I don't
and
know
over
how
in
I'm
your
going to be
mind.
successful. I don't know which
That's
way,
right.
but I know I'm supposed to be
And
successful.
that's why this is a podcast for entrepreneurs, right? And that word, I don't really know how I feel about that word. It's kind of hard to say, to be honest with you, because an entrepreneur is somebody that most people think own a business. The original root word of entrepreneur from a French, it was a French guy. I don't remember his name, but it was 1800, and he's basically explaining sharecrop farmers who move from one farm to the next. And a sharecrop farmer is somebody that's in their own business. They have a family or a tribe of people that follow them. They have some seed wheat. They'll typically make a lease payment to a farmer to lease 100 acres of their land. And then they take over all of the work, all of the sowing, all of the labor, all of the structuring, all of the skill associated. The farmer sits back and doesn't have to do anything. And then when the harvest comes in, the farmer gets some of it and the sharecroppers get some of it, and the lease payment is retired and the land is still owned by the farmer. And what this guy observed, there are some sharecroppers, tribes of traveling seed sowing, farming people that didn't own any land, and they would move from one season to the next from one area of lower yield to an area of higher yield. And that transition of resources from one field A to field B is what he called an entrepreneur. And the word entre and preneur put together, it actually means the between taker.
Mm.
So it's the person in between the harvest and the actual asset owner making that thing work, who's the between taker. They take from the in between, or we would call it today a middleman.
Mm.
Obviously, there's a lot more to sharecrop farming than being a middleman, but that's where that phrase comes from. So what's an intrapreneur? An intrapreneur is somebody who doesn't own the business, doesn't own the large technology corporation or retail store, wherever they work, but they are in a way, a sharecrop farmer for somebody else's business, and they're able to participate and add a tremendous amount of value. And so you don't have to be in your own business to be entrepreneurial minded. And for those of us who are entrepreneurial minded but may not own a business, we call those intrapreneurs. And so entrepreneurs are all about maximizing their yield to whatever corporation they work for or small business, what have you. And so there is a never ending ability to increase the yield that somebody can provide, which effectively is the value. Tony Robbins talks about all the time. You want to make a lot of money, focus on adding more value than anybody else, and your needs will be taken care of. Grant Cardone says it this way: the reason you have money problems is because nobody's ever heard of you. And if nobody's ever heard of you, it's probably because the value that you're providing is not high enough yet. And so we look for more leverage points on how to yield a bigger value.
Well, I hope and I pray that everyone who has listened today, everybody who's tuned in today, has found some value in what we've brought to the table.
I hope they had some fun.
I hope they had some fun, heard some stories. In the next episode, we will be covering the other 5 of Jeff's 9 daily disciplines that he puts on his checklist. So you won't want to miss that. I hope that you will subscribe, like, share with your friends. We really appreciate you tuning in today. And I just can't wait to hear more. You've got a great amount of value add to your listeners. And
to everybody out there listening, I just want you to know this is super fun for us. This is a labor of love. We're not sponsored by anybody. I don't know if that'll remain, but we're doing this because we love it. We've gone to the store and bought furniture and lighting and podcast booth, control center and cables and microphones because I feel a need to discharge a responsibility that's been put on me to put in front of the public and to my children for posterity some of the daily disciplines that have helped me survive in this new economy. And let's face it, we have a new economy. We have
Totally.
25 and I was watching a YouTube video the other day, this kid from $500 to 500 million in 5 years, and he's 27. It's like, my guess is him going to college and getting a W-2 job for 120 grand a year is a bad idea because he's taken us to school. He's taken me to school on what's actually possible. So when we see, and it's not just one person or 5 people or 10 people, there's tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of millions of people who are participating in the gig economy. And we the old folks, right? I'm 48 now. The folks who are over 40 need to recognize, number one, that our life's not over, not by a large stretch of the imagination. And number two, there's a tremendous amount of life experience that we've spent living in basically feudal Stone Age times compared to the internet era that we're in right now, that the hard work and the discipline and the focus and the controlled attention on a specific focused target that we have learned, which the 22 to 25-year-olds kind of take for granted because they don't have a family. They're not worried about maintaining a huge financial commitment to take care of a household or anything like that. And if they're off to the races and maybe didn't learn through trial and error that controlled attention is really the secret and parity is the secret of all success, how long standing can their success really be? Because at the end of the day, we get paid for what we do. We get paid for the value times whatever leverage points that we use to multiply that value to people. And that can happen at 20 years old or 120 if you live that long. So I hope that people are enjoying themselves and that they're seeing themselves in these portraits that we outline, that we lay out here for people's observations, and that anybody can start at any moment in time, especially in this economy, and go and create the financial goals that they want and manifest in their own lives progress. What does it take to be happy? It takes seeing progress. Why do I have 540 check boxes on my daily checklist? So I can see progress every few minutes throughout my day.
And some of those things can be just incremental
little
improvements,
things,
which can move big mountain.
Yeah, little hinges swing big doors, says W. Clement Stone. So thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.